Eileen. I'm the youth librarian here at the library, and I want to welcome you guys to week 2 of the first session of this club. If you don't remember, last week we went over just a few simple things about writing. So we talked about what was writing, which the definition from Merriam-Webster's dictionary is the act or art of visibly forming letters or characters. And then we talked a little bit about why do we write, and there's a lot of reasons why people write. I write because I know that I get better the more that I practice it, and the more that I do it, the better that I get, and then I have more confidence in myself. And I never really had a whole lot of confidence in my own writing skills until after I graduated high school, actually, and I started college. So again, it took me a lot of years of my life to build that confidence, but again, I practiced and practiced and practiced, and now I feel like I'm a better writer than I was, 10 years ago. And then we talked about the 6 forms of writing, which were personal, subject, creative, reflective, academic, and business. And again, we're not going to go over all of those in this club, and for right now, we're kind of sticking to personal writing and creative writing. And for this week's activities, what you're going to need are your finished story cubes. So I'm hoping that you guys had fun putting those together. You were supposed to color them and then cut them out and then carefully glue them together. So I've got all of mine right here on the table in front of me, which I will show you up close a little bit later in the video. You're also going to need one of your writing utensils, which I'm a person who flip-flops between wanting to write with a pencil and wanting to write with a pen. So make sure you have whichever one you prefer handy. And then lastly, you're going to want your special composition notebook. We are going to continue writing in this today. So yeah, make sure you have that ready to go. All right, we're going to jump right in to this week's activities. So here we go. The first activity that we are going to be doing today is a warm-up activity. So it's just supposed to last like less than 5 minutes. And what we're going to be doing is something called free writing. And if we remember from last week, the forms of writing that we went over, this is a form of personal writing. So while we're writing, we are remembering things about our lives or sharing things about our lives. And free writing is usually done as like a pre-writing activity to just get your mind working, warmed up. So again, we're just doing this as a warm-up activity. A lot of people use free writing as a way to build their confidence in their writing, because what you're supposed to do is you're just supposed to take a sheet of paper and write whatever is on your mind in that moment. So if you decide to work on this activity after school one day or after virtual learning, you might end up writing about something that you did in school that day, or something that you wanted to share with your parents or other caregivers in your house after you got home that day. Or let's say you decide to sit down and watch this video after dinner. You might just write about what you just ate for dinner, or how your stomach is feeling, or that you want dessert. It's just whatever is on your mind in that moment. So what we're going to do is I'm going to challenge you to get your composition notebooks and a writing utensil. And you're just going to flip open to the next blank page in your composition notebook. And you're just going to start writing. And I want you guys to write for a total of 2 minutes. And you can actually just continue playing this video because I'm going to have some little music playing for 2 straight minutes, and that'll be kind of your timer for how long you should write. And again, this is an activity that not only gets you warmed up in the mindset to start an actual writing activity short story, but it's also supposed to build your own self-confidence, because one of the things that comes with being a better writer and creative writer is you need a lot of self-confidence in your ideas and the things that you're writing about. So again, we don't want to judge our thoughts or feelings that we're writing down during this free writing activity. We are just writing and not worrying about what we're writing, our grammar, spelling. You're just free writing. You don't judge what you've written. You don't go back and erase or scratch out. You just write whatever is in your brain. So go ahead and try that for 2 minutes, and we'll see how you feel afterwards. thought it was a really, really long 2 minutes and you only wrote for half of that 2 minutes. Maybe you thought that 2 minutes went by really, really fast and you filled up a whole page or two of the thoughts that were in your brain at the time. I remember the first time I did a free writing activity. I was in high school, I believe, and I was so nervous that I was judging my own thoughts as I was writing them down. But one thing that I reminded myself here is that the more that I did it, the better I felt, and I didn't feel as awkward. Sometimes you feel like the thoughts that you're writing down are not significant enough, or they needed to be some big important idea. But again, that's not the point of free writing. The point of free writing is just to write whatever's on your mind at the time, and not to judge yourself. So I hope you didn't judge your writing, and you just feel really good and free about what you wrote. And again, this is just something to keep between you and your composition notebook. So you don't have to share it with anybody, you don't have to reread it, or anything like that. So I hope you had some fun with that activity. And we're probably going to be doing that, maybe not every week, but again, it's just a good warm-up activity. So you'll definitely see us do it again sometime. And we might even go a little bit longer. When you do this activity, a lot of times they have you do it for 10 minutes and they feel like 10 minutes, you get the most benefit out of doing it for that long. So we're gonna maybe work up to that, but I like that we started with the 2 minutes, and I hope you had some fun with it and surprised yourself. Before we get into our main activity for today in using our story cubes that we built last week, I wanted to go over some things about short stories again. Now, at the end of last week, I challenged each of you to write your own short story, and I gave you a prompt about finding a baby dragon egg in your backyard. I hope you guys had some fun coming up with a story about finding this dragon egg in your backyard. And today I'm going to be reading a short story from an actual book, and I always think it's helpful to hear examples or see examples of things before going out on your own and trying new things. So before we get into our more creative writing or creative short story writing, we're going to go ahead and read this short story. And a short story can, again, be anything from just a page, so maybe the story that you wrote about your dragon egg was just a page or a couple paragraphs. It could also be, 15 pages. Some short stories are 60 to 70 pages. It really just depends on the author and what they wanted for their story. So when we start writing more short stories, remember that the length is determined by the author, and in this case, all of our club members are authors, so you get to decide how long your short stories are going to be. The short story that we're going to be reading today is from a book by Terry Pratchett called Dragons at Crumbling Castle. And this book is in our collection here at the library, so you can check it out after today if you would like to read more of his stories. And the story that we are going to be reading, or I'm going to be reading for you today, is called Doc the Caveman. And it's about 15 pages, so it shouldn't take me too long. But here we go. We are going to be learning about Doc the Caveman. "What's he doing now?" asked Uggy the witch doctor, trying to peer through the crack. The rest of the tribe clustered around the cave mouth while Hal, the chieftain, tried to see through the gap in the wooden door. From inside came the sound of sawing. "It's too dark to see," said Hal. "Looks like he's got a tree in there." And I'm going to show you guys the picture of our caveman on the cover there. Suddenly, the door burst down and the people scattered for safety. A great round thing came rumbling out of the cave, spinning rapidly as it rolled down the hill. After it came a small man in a tiger skin much too big for him, and as he shot past, they heard him shriek, "It'll revolutionize transportation!" Then he fell into the river. Hal picked himself up out of a thorn bush. He quite liked old Doc, but felt that he went a bit too far at times. Being inventive was all very well, but not when it stuck thorns into you. Meanwhile, Doc was blowing bubbles and trying desperately to invent swimming. "Arms out, breath in," he cried, and sank like a stone. Uggy fished him out by climbing along a branch and grabbing him none too kindly by the hair. Dripping wet, Doc was brought to Hal, who was trying to look dignified while his wife fussed around trying to pull thorns out of him. "What was that?" said Hal coldly. Doc sneezed. "I had thought of calling it a wheel. It'll revolutionize transport." "You said that about the other thing, the boat. It sank, with me in it, in a particularly deep bit of river, as I recall." "Ah, yes, but that was because lack of aquatic stability." Doc shuffled off to his cave, sneezing and leaving a trail of puddles. Poor Doc. Nothing ever quite went right, ever since he had invented language and when he accidentally dropped a very heavy stone on his foot. And then there was the time when he'd stuck a seed into a hole in the ground, patted the earth around it, and invented farming. A wild horse had come along and eaten the first plant. He sat in his damp, cold cave and shivered idly. He picked up 2 dry sticks that had come from the tree and, for want of anything better to do, began to rub them together. So there he is, rubbing them together in his cave. Meanwhile, Hal and the rest of the tribe went mammoth hunting. Things were becoming harder. On the horizon, glimmering, was a long, white line of cliffs. The ice was coming back, and it was getting colder. All sorts of wild creatures were roaming the plains and peering into the caves at night. When they returned, Hal sent one of his sons to fish the wheel out of the river. As they climbed the hill, Hal sniffed. "Smells like..." He stopped. Doc would have to invent some more language, especially a word for what trees smell like after they had been struck by lightning. "Smells sort of, hot, wouldn't you say, Uggy?" A thin column of smoke was rising from the cave mouth. Doc came running by with a dry branch in his arms. His face was black and his eyebrows were singed. "It'll revolutionize central heating," he cried. "Oh dear," said Hal. "Oh dear, oh dear, oh dear. What now, I wonder?" "Come and see," cried Doc. The tribe filled into the cave. There in the middle of the floor was what looked like a very small volcano. Orange flames leaped up from it hungrily. "Well, what is it this time?" asked Hal. "It's called fire. It's quite simple to make. All you need is 2 dry pieces of wood, and then there you are. Heat, light, and something nice to look at, all in one go. Safe as houses. You invented me a house. It had a roof. It fell in. A particularly heavy piece of wood it was, as I recall." But Hal let Doc bring the fire into the main cave, and they sat around it while they tucked into cold, raw mammoth. "Are you quite sure it's safe? Won't it escape?" asked Hal. "Actually, it's hard enough to keep going," said Doc, putting another piece of wood on it. As he did so, he dropped a piece of mammoth into the ashes. Slowly, it began to turn brown. "I tried it out on the old saber-toothed tiger up in the mountains while you were gone. Animals are scared of it, so if we put it in the mouth of the cave, they'll stay away. I say, what's happened here?" He picked up the piece of meat. It smelled good. "Hal," he said slowly, "would you like to help the cause of scientific progress? Here, try this." Feeling a bit of a fool, Hal did. "Umph," he said. "Tasty." He looked around. There was bound to be some sort of catch to it somewhere. They dragged the rest of the mammoth into the cave. That evening, they had fried mammoth, baked mammoth, mammoth chops, roast mammoth, mammoth steaks, and grilled mammoth. Then, when there was nothing left but the bones, they sat around feeling as though they would burst. All except Doc. He sat there with his chin on his hands, frowning. They could see that he was inventing a new word. And there he is, sitting. "Coup," he said. "Coup," suggested Hal. "Collar? Camp? No. Coup, cookery." So cookery it became. They were so busy talking about it that they didn't notice a spark float up and land on the heap of leaves that was Uggy's bed. Until Uggy sat down on it. He was an old man, but he could move fast. It bit me! Woof! The bed flared up, setting fire to all the others. They ran from the cave, but the fire went with them, burning up the grass and trees. Suddenly, the whole forest was alit. Hal and the others stood waist deep in the river, watching the flames. It was a good cave, Hal said. The ground was nice and soft. Where's Doc? Asked Uggy. He left the cave. I know. Gone for good, I hope, said Hal, and poor old Doc, hiding in the reeds, heard him. Sadly, he loaded up his canoe with the wheel, dry fire sticks, and 1 or 2 inventions he was working on. Then, his paddles making little rings in the dark water, he floated off down the great river. Soon the fire was nothing more than a red glow on the horizon. After the fire had burned up most of the hunting lands around their home, Hal's tribe had to move on. Far away in the north, the giant ice glaciers were advancing, and it was beginning to snow. They plodded on down the great river, dragging their few possessions behind them on crude sleds, because none of them could remember exactly what the wheel looked like. And when darkness fell, they had to climb trees and shiver, because only Doc knew the secret of fire. And Doc was gone. They called out to him once or twice, but all that came back were echoes. He must have gone down to the sea itself, said Hal, and they say there are all kinds of monsters there. And they all thought of poor Doc, all alone. He would have known what to do to catch wild animals in the snow or to light a fire without wood. The tribe sat down under a ledge of rock, and the only sound was the chattering of 24 pairs of teeth. There was nothing to make a fire with, even if they knew how. Uggy? Yes? What's this black rock? Hal held it out. Here is a picture of them. I don't know. It's called coal, I think. There's lots of it around, but it's absolutely useless. Throw it away. Hal wrapped his furs around himself and watched the snow, wondering what Doc was doing at this moment. The morning dawn cleared and frosty, and the wolf pack found them. They were prehistoric wolves, which was bad, and they were hungry, which was worse. Like Hal, they were looking for food. They sat around the rock ledge with their tongues hanging out. Uggy, Wug, Dal, Hoot, and Rodney, come with me, said Hal wearily. The rest of you, stay here. Picking up his club, he strode out to meet the wolves, and the leader of the pack crouched down, ready to leap. And as it sprang at Hal, a stick whistled through the air and hit the wolf in the neck. Having a bit of trouble, said Doc. In one hand, he held a bent piece of wood with a string stretched across it. In the other, a small stick with a stone point. It'll revolutionize hunting, he cried, as he shot another wolf. The rest ran for their lives. Where did you come from? Gasped Hal. Oh, I've built myself a little place down by the river, handy for fishing, you know, with nets. They'll revolutionize the industry. Makes a change from mammoth and tiger and all the rest. However you cook them. Like my coat, wool. There's these things called sheep, and if you chase them for long enough, stop, said Hal. Have you got a fire there? Several. So they decided that Doc had learned his lesson and allowed him back into the tribe. Soon, a few more houses grew up and became a village, and later a town, down by the great river. Doc sat alone in his house. He was growing old, but he was working on his greatest invention. Suddenly, he sat up. His history, he cried. I declare the Stone Age at an end. History will start tomorrow. And so it has been ever since. The end. And I'm going to show you one more picture. There he is celebrating in his little house cave. All right, I hope you guys enjoyed that short story. Again, I was just reading that as an example of a published work by a real-life author. And again, this book is called Dragons at Crumbling Castle by Terry Pratchett, and it will be available for checkout here at the library after today. Now that we are done with reading our short story example for the week, we're going to get started with our actual activity for this week. So go ahead and get those story cubes out because we are going to be using them. And in just a minute here, I'm going to show you some up-close shots of mine that I made and how we're going to use them for our activity this week. And this week, we are going to be focusing on the parts of a story. So you may or may not have already learned about the 5 W's in school, and the 5 W's answer questions about the basic parts of a story. So the 5 W's are who, what, where, when, and why. And sometimes they also throw an H on the end there for how. So we have the 5 W's, who, what, where, when, and why, and then sometimes how. And those are all questions that you need to answer before you can start a story. Every story has a who, so the characters in your story. The what are they doing in the story? Where is the story taking place, and where are these characters interacting with each other or things in the story? When is the story taking place? Is it taking place at night? Is it taking place in the morning? Is it taking place back in history, so like in 1900? And then there's the why. Why is our character doing what they're doing? What are they doing? And then the how is how are they doing it? Sometimes we want to describe how characters are doing things in stories. So again, we're going to be using our story cubes and the 5 W's and sometimes an H for how to practice just coming up with ideas for short stories. So we're not actually going to be writing a full short story this week. I'm not going to give you guys any prompts. We're just going to be doing a little activity with the story cubes and the 5 W's. So here we go. So what you guys see here are my 8 finished story cubes. And again, you guys should have gotten 9 story cube templates. One of them was completely blank, and so that should still be in your folders. But I did ask you guys to work on creating your other 8 story cubes. So here you can see mine are all colored, cut out, and successfully glued them together. I'm just going to go over them again really quick. So here are my 2 character cubes. They've got just a bunch of different, let's see, we've got a little bird here, we've got a little princess, this just looks like a businessman in a tie, we've got a bunny, a sloth, a kitty cat, this one, let's see, what does this one have on it? This one we've got, let's see, Frankenstein, a little ghost, and then, let's see, what else do we have? We have a unicorn. We've also got a mermaid for all the fantasy lovers out there. So there are our character cubes. And then we have the elements cube, and that one has different elements like fire, and we just had fire, a big feature in our short story that I read to you guys. We've got water, we've got nature, there's wind, and then we've got lightning, and this one, I'm considering this one just to be kind of evil. It's just a force of evil. So there's our elements, and then we have our monster cube, and monsters take all shapes and sizes. So we have a dragon and this little furry monster, which you could call them whatever. We've got another little monster here. So these are all just different types of monsters. This one's a dinosaur. And then we get into our object 1 and 2 cubes. And the objects are literally just things that our characters could interact with. So here we've got a train. Oh, actually, that's our transport one. Here are our object cubes. So here's our first object cube. We've got an instrument. So you could either do general instruments or just simply a guitar. Some cheese, a pencil, sock, a cabinet, a book. And then this one's got some more objects, a cupcake, a hat, a star wand, a necklace, so all sorts of fun objects there. And then our last 2, one of them is transport. So we've got all different modes of transportation. So we've got, this one's a space shuttle, a couch, a car, a bicycle, so all sorts of transportation. And then this one is the settings cube. So this one has got all different settings on it. We've got a mountain, a house, a castle, under the sea. So again, all 8 of our story cubes here in front of us. And these will help us in answering the 5 W's that I talked about a little bit earlier. So for instance, the who W. Which of the story cubes do you think could answer the who? We've got our character cubes, monster, elements, transport, setting, and objects. I'm going to give you guys a second to think about it. So the who can be answered with the character cubes. So we have our character 1, our character 2, and then also our monster cube. Our what could be answered by the objects or even the transportation, depending on what we're talking about. Then we have the where. So which of these cubes do you guys think could answer where a story takes place for us? If you guessed the settings cube, you are correct. So that's the one with all the different locations on it. So castle and outer space. And we've also got the when. And that one's not really going to be answered by one of the story cubes. And then the why is also going to be kind of up to you guys in terms of why your characters are doing certain things in their stories. So let's go ahead and I'm gonna explain the activity that we're gonna do today, and then I'm gonna send you off to get working on it. Now that I've shown you just an up-close shot of some of my story cubes as an example for you guys to see the finished product, I'm gonna just talk about what activity we're actually gonna do with the story cubes today. So what we're gonna do is, instead of writing a lengthy or a few paragraphs for a short story, we are actually just going to practice using our story cubes to answer the 5 W's and sometimes the H for how. And so what I'm going to ask you guys to do is get all your story cubes out, get your composition notebook out and a writing utensil, and we're going to start off by writing out the 5 W's and then the H for how. So write who, what, where, when, why, and how on your sheet of paper. And then you're going to take your first set of story cubes, which are going to be the character cubes, and you're going to go ahead and pick one of them, and you're going to shake it, shake it, shake it, and then you're just going to roll it out on the table, and whichever picture lands face up, and for mine, it landed on the businessman with a tie, and it doesn't have to be a businessman. You could invent whatever character you want for this, but it's just a gentleman in a tie. So that's my who. So for me, my who is going to be the businessman. And then the what. So I have to pick what my businessman is going to be interacting with in my 1-sentence story. So I'm going to grab my object cubes. And remember, we have 2 object cubes, but I'm just going to pick one, and I'm going to pick the one that has the cheese on it. So I'm going to go ahead and shake it, shake it, shake it, shake it, shake it, and I'm going to roll it out on the table. And mine landed face up on a book. So we've got the what is a book. And then we're going to have to answer where. So now I am going to get my settings cube because we want to figure out where our story is taking place. So here's my settings cube. We only have one of those. So I'm going to shake it, shake it, shake it, shake it, shake it, and I'm going to roll it out on the table, and it landed on underwater or oceans or a lake. Any kind of form of water is what we're going to assign to the one with fish. So I've got my businessman, the book, and the water setting. And then we have the when and why question to answer. And what we're going to do with those is we're going to just decide when our story is taking place. So we've got our businessman who's doing something with a book, and the setting is water. So I'm going to go ahead, and my 1-sentence story is going to be the businessman was reading a book by the lake one morning, because he just wanted to relax a little bit on his weekend. There is my one sentence story, and that answers all of my 5 W's. The who is the businessman, the what is he's reading a book, the where is next to a lake, the when is early one morning, and why is because he wanted to relax. So here's my challenge to you this week. I want you guys to take your 8 story cubes, and I want you to try to write 15 to 20 one-sentence stories. So you're going to take your story cubes and you're going to answer the first 3 W's, the who, the what, the where, with your different story cubes. And then you're going to fill out the when and the why yourselves. And then you're just going to write a one-sentence story with those 5 parts. And again, sometimes you can go ahead and write what the H is for how. I didn't necessarily define that, but I told you in my explanation, what he was doing, and he was just sitting by, my businessman was just sitting by the lake reading, so it didn't necessarily need a descriptive how in there. So again, go ahead and try to write 15 to 20 one-sentence stories in your composition notebooks. And if you feel like you want to share some of your one-sentence stories with me, please feel free to send me an email. If you have questions about this week's activities, or you are missing some kind of material from your Take and Make bag, shoot me an email or call me here at the library and just let me know.